Good afternoon. Welcome to CEOs Get Real. I'm your host, Christopher Marson with Exemplar Companies, and today we have Ise Lyfe.
Hey, man.
From Lyfe Productives.
Yeah.
Product development, social marketing, and product development firm.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you, man.
Glad you made it out. Well, let's toast first before we get real.
Yep.
We got some natural energy drink today.
I cramped the style without the wine.
Yeah, you said you don't drink. How did that happen?
Yeah. It's not like I'm not against drinking or anything. I think people, it's like a serious thing because drinking is such a social thing. So people go, well, what's wrong? Or they think you went to AA or something, you know? It's straight up just, I don't like the taste. It's not even, it's not deeper than that.
I love it. So you're just doing you.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I got to know you a bit over the last, few weeks, few months, and really have appreciated who you are, just getting to know you. So I wanted to share, have you have the opportunity to share what you're up to at Lyfe Productives. Tell me about, you had this business 16 years, I found out.
Yeah, man.
So you don't got a lot of gray hair.
No. I started. So what happened, man, is that before I graduated high school, I got hired at Def Jam, at this big record company.
Def Jam?
Yeah.
Hip hop?
Yeah, hip hop record label, Def Jam.
Cows, that's crazy.
I got picked up as a Bay Area regional marketer for Def Jam, which basically is a glorified way of saying that I got picked up as a promoter. And at the time, a shift was happening where clubs were taking, prior to the early 2000s, if you went out to a nightclub, especially I'm from Oakland, San Francisco, New York, Oakland, Los Angeles, Atlanta, New York, Chicago, if you went to a club, there was a stage because there were live performances in the club. That was being pushed out. And a DJ, in the hip hop context, a DJ didn't have a turntable with 2 turntables and 8 crates of records. Serato comes in with a little small station. Yeah. So, what does that mean for a club? A club, well, if they can get rid of the square footage of the stage, they can pack it with more people. They can add a VIP section. So it was at this interesting intersection where the culture and nightlife was shifting. And my role at Def Jam was to help present their artists at after parties or at mixers after major concerts and tours. Okay. At the same time, I was becoming very politicized. I was becoming very galvanized around themes of public interest, social justice, social entrepreneurship. And I saw that when I was going, so let's say I leave a meeting for Def Jam where they're figuring out how to market or cross-market malt liquor with an artist. And then I leave that meeting and I go to a meeting that's about reducing the hospitalization rate of people in the inner city, children in the inner city, for asthma based on pollution in the air. Well, the meeting about the malt liquor and the way that they're getting the word out is very provocative.
Yeah.
And a lie. The idea is drink all of this malt liquor and you're going to be so cool.
Yeah.
When the reality is people who drink lots of malt liquor are losers.
Yeah.
And
they end up in a hospital in an inner city. But
That's right. And then over here, these people are saying, don't poison children with air.
Right.
This is true. But their ability and capacity to leverage something true was way less impactful than this group over here marketing something that wasn't true. So for me, the market that I saw was like, whoa, how do I take the same tenets that make this thing that's provocative but not whole? How do I take those principles and apply it over here to something that is? And I love hip hop and the culture. I love the label, the artists that were at the label. All of that was awesome. And for me as a 18, 19, 20, I left Def Jam when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
For me, that was like the coolest gig to have.
There's no doubt.
Oh my God. It was the coolest gig to have. I left there and I had started this little watermark company, really just so that I could take a bigger take of the door on the events I was doing. Yeah.
When you started Lyfe Productives, that was because of taking a bigger take of the door?
Yeah. So this is the way it worked. That are you interested in hearing how it works?
We got to get to how the genesis of this thing started.
So let's say you own Chris's club in Bakersfield.
Okay.
And your club was built in 1920s for square dancing for farmers. It holds 2,000 people, but now it's 2003. And the most people you get in there is 200. They pay $5.
Yeah.
Well, as a Bay Area regional marketer for Def Jam, I bring the hottest artists at Def Jam to your club. And now instead of 200 people, you get 1,500 people there. And instead of charging $5, now you charge $20. I tell you, keep the 5, give me the 15, and keep your bar. But then I was having to split that percentage with Def Jam and the higher ups in the promoting at the company. So by me building relationships with artists and with DJs, I was able to come in and say, well, no, this little production company that I've started, we're producing this, we're just paying the artists. And this is how I got in the mix. But there was all these other things. I was going to radio. I was doing product placement. I was in all of that.
It's before influencers.
Oh yeah, way before any of that. And so as I got more socially conscious and aware and wanting to do something that had more of substance or a purpose to it, I started figuring out, well, how do I apply those tenets to these campaigns? And I started picking up clients in Kaiser Permanente, and I quit at Def Jam. I enrolled in school for a brief stint, and I just started applying those same tenets, and it was a perfect storm between that. Also, as an artist, being very involved in like spoken word and hip hop theater, and coming from Oakland, where if you're like, I live in Los Angeles now, if you live in LA, if you're from LA, you have an aunt or a cousin or a partner that's a director or a producer or something like that, where if you're from where I'm from, somebody that you're related to or connected to is from some political party, or they work in tech, and so all of these things kind of just gave me a momentum, and I'm just blessed. It worked, man.
Wow, that's amazing.
It worked.
Well, so tell me, what was the allurement to having purpose? Like, where did that come from for you?
I think that there's a thing. This doesn't matter if you're in, let's say you're a conservative guy in Tennessee right now. Somewhere there's a conversation around whether are you a true American. And let's say you're a guy like me from East Oakland. No one says, are you a true American in the hood? But they say, are you real? All of this is a mutual conversation about authenticity.
Yeah, sure.
And so for me, I had this compass in my chest that all people have, especially in business, where it's not a question of whether authenticity is a thing, it's whether you care about it and is it a value.
Yeah.
And I valued that. Culturally, I valued that. Professionally, I valued that. So then you start scaling the products you're building and the business you're in and the entrepreneur things that you're stewarding around. Is this an authentic thing to build? And am I building a career for myself that is authentic? And I think that's where it came from.
But where did we've been a benefit corporation since the beginning of the time. And we had a multi-bottom line when we were founded.
Yeah.
That was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And we even added the spiritual bottom line, the triple bottom line.
I saw that.
And so at that time, though, that was itself provocative.
Yeah.
And the word authenticity wasn't in the dialogue.
No.
So but Def Jam, no doubt, was authentic.
Yeah.
But like, where did you get, before you could name it, because was that the word back then, or was it something else? Was it just you were in touch with it, but you didn't name it authenticity?
No, I think that I came up as a young person and then professionally in an environment that was always innovating. So remember, we're from the Bay Area where tech is being innovated, where different types of offenses and defenses and sports are being innovated agriculture is being innovated. I mean, way before we were before it was legal in the middle of downtown Oakland, there was a university called Oaksterdam University. This was a cannabis academy. There's always been, so I came up around that, but then I also came up around conversations around being real and being authentic. And this is in labor union conversation. This is in street culture conversation. It's in radical political conversation. It's in science and in the academy. There's just a metric where I grew up at. In different areas of the country have a metric or a culture that I think benefits business. I think we don't talk about that enough. That different areas, so for example, there's this big lie about Los Angeles. People will talk about LA and they'll say, oh, it's so fake. You have maybe a 10-mile radius where all the fakeness is centered in LA. But most of Los Angeles is trees, beaches, and creative people. It's a very mystical place. It's not fake. It's creative. It's people are building something out of nothing, and that's why in LA where the film industry is centered, you have beautiful illusion that's created artistically. Well, for me, coming from the Bay Area, I think that's what it was. It was the blend of tech, a potent street culture, and social activism that impacted me to have a compass around what is authentic. Not meaning that one thing is real and everything else is fake, but wherever you are on the spectrum, do you authentically exist there in that spectrum? And I think that had a great impact on me.
Wow, that's really a blessing to grow up and take that out of the environment and that you were surrounded by. Mm-hmm. And then your experience with Def Jam had to be like totally amazing.
Yeah, the biggest thing I learned at Def Jam that has definitely a key to my success. Our company has a high valuation, we do really well. And one thing I learned at Def Jam was this, that I'm almost reluctant, but in being authentic, I am going to just share this. I have a hyper value on the B and C market. The first time it dawned on me, I was 16 years old. I went to every A's game in the summer with my grandpa from when I was 8 years old to maybe when I was 17. And as most street kids, we get real into shoes, like real into tennis shoes. Yeah. And so one day, my grandpa asked me to go to the baseball game with him, and I asked if my friend Lamar could come. He said yeah. And you know, who knows what shoes we had on, but definitely I probably had on some Nike Air Max 95s. Lamar probably had on a pair of Jordans. And we go to the game, and we're laughing at everyone's shoes. Because, you know, it's mostly like these white dads, right, you know, with Skechers on and Birkenstock.
They don't think about their shoes when they're going to the game.
Yeah, you want to see the broke dude, look at the Air Max 95. Mm-hmm. You want to see the rich dude, he's got on some weird ass shoes, you know? But we didn't know that. And so we're laughing. And then it just hit me, man. I was 16. I said, Mar, yeah, man, okay, my shoes cost $130. Your shoes cost whatever they cost. But we're the only ones in this whole stadium with these shoes on. And all of these guys, if he only paid $60 for their shoes, but they're everywhere. Yeah. If we were just counting shoes, there's a valuation on Skechers here that is beating Nike per capita when we're here. That was the first time I started thinking about that. But then when I learned at Def Jam, in the promotion game, you go do a party in LA, in New York, in San Francisco, that's a big party. All the attention is there, but the profit margin was slim. It might cost $30,000 to do a party, and you walk with $35,000, but $30,000 in cost. You go home with $5,000, and I'm splitting it with people. Yeah. But man, you hit Bakersfield, that B market, Modesto, Scottsdale, not Phoenix. Ypsilanti.
Oh, sure. Michigan?
Ann Arbor.
Did you say that? Yeah, Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor's great.
Yeah. So go to Ann Arbor, not Detroit. Yeah, you know.
That's right.
Whoa. Now the party, it still generates $30,000, but it only costs $8,000 to do. Yeah. And based on where my politic was leaning, also this is where the folks were.
Yeah.
The people who couldn't afford to go to the city, the people who were still valuable, the people who mattered. And now, in my work now, a bid will come out for some big project, and the whole industry that I'm in, they're going for that gig, mostly because of ego. Because they want to be, we're the ones who did it. One of my mentors, he taught me something. He worked at Burrell, which was a huge marketing company in Chicago. And he said they went to McDonald's, and McDonald's gave him the gig, but McDonald's corporate, they slashed their fee 25%. And McDonald's, with no problem, just confidently said, but by me being in your portfolio, you're going to get 5 other gigs. So take it or leave it. So there's an ego that drives these conversations. For me, instead of going after the A market all the time based on ego, we make A market decisions, A market capital, by focusing on an underserved B market, C market even. And I learned that at Def Jam. I learned that from seeing that the people in Bakersfield dance to the same music as people in Los Angeles. And they have value, and they're not jaded, and they'll come back again, and they're grateful. And so that...
Did that open your eyes?
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time, because what I knew coming in, like any entrepreneur, here's another thing from the streets. In the streets, I don't believe in gangs. I'm against gangs. People shouldn't join gangs, but gangs are real. And in the streets, you get jumped in a gang. What does this mean? This means that if you want to be in a gang, you get in the middle of a circle and 5 to 10 guys punch and kick you and count down. And then after that, they give you a hug. And now you're in the gang. It's sick. Capitalism operates the same way. When you first want to get into that university, you get your ass hazed.
Yeah.
When you first want to get into that industry,
yeah,
you're going to be condescended on cell phones. People who are not fit to carry a cup of your urine are going to talk to you crazy. And you get jumped in the game that way. You build a skin for that.
Yeah.
So I learned that, because when you come in the game, you may look in the mirror and go, man, I'm an A market guy. Mm-hmm. But no one's heard of you, dude. You're a D market guy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what talent you have, who you are, you're a D market man or woman in the market. So for me, that's what it opened my eyes to too. It said, man, if I know I'm D, I build my confidence in the C market and the B market.
Yeah.
And this is what I advise and when I say young, I don't mean your age.
Yeah, sure.
I mean
newer entrepreneur.
New in the entrepreneur game. Humble yourself and learn from going and taking those lower hanging fruits, and that did open my eyes.
That's great. So how did you pivot from the promotion game into what you're doing now, social marketing, product development? Because you have some big clients.
Yeah. So I appreciate the question. So for me, I wanted to start developing and figuring out ways to make products that were good for people, accessible to people who weren't typically, reached out to.
Okay.
So.
You mean a target audience that's not typically marketed to?
Yes, by healthy brands, positive brands, provocative, long-lasting brands. So, for example, in the lending market, there's the actual lending market, and then there's the predatory lending market.
Yes, so there's this, there's this, and there's that.
Yeah, right. So the regular market is American Express, your local bank. You get a loan, maybe at a 3.5% interest rate.
Sure.
That's the deal with guys like you and I take, or better.
Then there's the loan to own guys.
Then there's the payday loan.
Right.
Then there's with the 25% interest. Mm-hmm. This is predatory lending.
Sure.
The thing is that these folks over here in the healthy lending market, they're not marketing to folks on this side of things.
Yeah.
KFC, McDonald's, other fast food corporations, they're marketing heavy in inner city communities. I'm curious to see, what is Cliff Bar spending in South LA to market? What is REI spending to market? Even in media conversations, are political conversations being marketed in a way that speaks to guys like me?
Yeah.
You know, and it's better for business when it does.
Yeah.
And so for me, a big part of it became about, well, how do I go to these brands and say, hey, but I was willing to get jumped in the game. I was willing to say, no money. Just for 6 months, can I just be around and can we build, can I prove what it is that we can do? And so that became a big part of what I was doing. So as a business owner or a corporation owner or a social benefit organization, I'm talking about huge foundations.
Right.
If you're just, if you're at work and somebody walks in the office and they say, hey, will you hire me or will you give me money? It's like, oh, whatever. But what happens when somebody walks in your office and says, hey, this thing that you're not working on?
Right. So you didn't care about it anyway because you weren't working on it.
They weren't working on it. They
Right.
weren't thinking about that market. We came and we brought that market to them.
So you said, let me create value in an area you didn't even care about or know about.
Exactly.
Let me give it a shot. You got nothing to lose, right?
Exactly.
And so you proved your stripes and weren't afraid to do it. And weren't afraid to do it first and then figure out how to prove your value so that you can establish a value for the market.
I wasn't smart enough to be afraid.
Okay, wait.
I remember the first time it dawned on me.
And now you're smart enough not to be afraid.
Yeah, that's exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's an amazing story.
Oh, thanks.
So since then, I can see, I mean, you work with Kaiser.
Yeah.
There's a number of other big brands you've worked with over the years.
Definitely. So we've done work with Comedy Central, with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, Deloitte, a bunch of major foundations. I'm excited right now for an organization called Prosperity Now out of DC that we're working with. We worked with the National Fair Housing Alliance. I mean, the list goes on.
Okay, so how is it just that so why are they not woke yet to the target markets that you're bringing to them?
Well, I think now they are.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of us that are suffering and having to really humble ourselves, not suffering in business, but we're watching people kind of get something that we've been talking about for 15 years.
Right.
So now people they do have an awareness. And I think the awareness was always there without naming them. But I'll say this about the biggest tech company you can think of. They hired us to come in and consult and help them figure out diversity at their company. Mm-hmm. And very earnestly, they sat down with me and they said, and my team, and they said, we can't figure out why there's no diversity here. We can't figure it out. And I said,
meaning they're trying.
That's what they were saying.
Okay.
But I said, you're figuring out how to get cars to drive themselves. You're figuring out how to get data to move across the world in a millisecond, but you can't figure out how to get certain people here.
That's great. The way you put it. The way you put it.
The reason you're not is because you don't care. That's a hard thing to admit. It's a hard thing to admit that something that everyone says they care about, you don't really care about it. And in our society, normally the first step to caring isn't more morale or morals, I should say. It's more so stigma. Stigma. My mother told me when she was pregnant with my little sister, at 3 months pregnant, she could stand on a corner and smoke a cigarette and no one would say anything. My grandpa, he was on the fence about whether or not you have to put on a seatbelt. He called seatbelts a racket.
Is that right?
Yeah. But now it's stigmatized to us. If a woman stands on the street anywhere smoking a cigarette, visibly pregnant, someone will call the police. You can't.
But you're talking about stigma because you care?
Huh? No, I'm saying people. It's stigmatized now to not care. It's stigmatized. Go ahead.
Well, because I'm going to tie it to authenticity.
Yes.
Because what you're saying is that they didn't care.
Yes.
But that they said they cared.
Yes.
Which means that it wasn't authentic.
It was not authentic, no.
So there's a lot of whitewashing or whatever you want to call it, greenwashing. There's greenwashing going on. There's all kinds of washing going on.
Yeah, 100%.
Where people pander and pretend to care, but they're not authentic.
No, and I would say even also people who say outright they don't care about something, they haven't taken the time to pause and understand it to form an opinion about not caring. It's absolute ethical laziness.
Yeah.
of like not looking at something for a short period of time. But what happens, be it stigma, circumstance, pop culture, what happens when people are forced by whatever force to care? Well, we see right away.
Do you think people become forced to care?
Yeah.
Or you mean like what? By stigma?
By
outside forces?
By stigma, litigation,
sure.
A riot,
Okay.
whatever the source is. Think about this. The civil rights movement in America was 12 years long. Before that, segregation. Before that, slavery.
Yeah.
In 12 years, a small part of the population of all different races, genuinely caring, changed this country and the world in 12 years. Because whatever the force is that makes people, so what was the force there? Well, the force was there is that all these racial and racist ideas were permeating. Mm-hmm. And everyone knew it. Everybody's dad was Archie Bunker. You knew what the opinion was on different people. But then cameras videotape people being sprayed with hoses and dogs being let loose on children. Emmett Till gets murdered, he's 15 years old, and they put it on the cover of Jet magazine. Now people are faking shock. I had no idea. So it happens in our industries too.
Well, aren't body cams and policing doing some of this?
Yeah.
In a modern time.
100%. It's the same thing. So what I found, the point I want to make is that what I found is that when people are forced by whatever the force is to resolve an issue or attempt to, you get a couple genuine people in the room that innovate and can resolve the issue. I think that's the thing that I love about product development and about social entrepreneurship is that when you get blips of authenticity, you can resolve an issue and permanently reverse it, and I believe in that, and I think that that's been a driving force.
So let me ask you about that, because in Exemplar I use a statement called the economic power to care, and I use that because you have to be able to survive giving a damn.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
Well, and there's an art to that.
Yeah.
If you want to if you are authentic about like wanting, again, you talked about social, environmental, values.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to either you're going to compromise them to make a living, or you're going to figure out a way to make a living not compromising.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about your resolve as a CEO.
Yeah.
Right. But you kind of talked about two flavors of caring. Mm-hmm. Which I'm wondering in your perspective if both of them get to authenticity, because one of them is by force. Mm-hmm. The other one is by just caring.
Yeah.
Because you care.
Yeah.
And have you noticed that do both roads lead to the same kind of authentic caring, or is the caring that comes through force or blunt trauma or whatever, or pressure, still have an essence to it that's not quite there?
It has an essence that's not there, and the reason is what's there is resentment.
Yeah, because of how they got there.
Because how they got there was resentment. But the argument is, so if you got there and you're resentful, would you have ever gotten there? So is it better? It's that question: is it better to have love and loss or not? No. Is it better to get there and be resentful, or we never get there?
Okay.
And I think people who are on the victim side of whatever the issue is, right. And I'm talking about like violence, even just you're talking about economics, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What happens if I presented at Yale, Princeton, Harvard, Twitter?
You've done TED Talks.
I've done TED Talks and all that, right?
Yeah.
The 21-year-old version of me, out of East Oakland. If I walked on those campuses, security would have been called on me, even if I was walking to deliver a pizza. It wasn't a space for me.
Huh.
So now the tide has changed.
Even in the progressive campuses that they were even back then?
Even worse. Let me tell you, man, in my experience in business, where I've caught, and most people of color will tell you this, if they're honest, where you're suspected, where you get a cop called on you, where you your decline before you get to really present is not in conservative sectors.
Yeah, that's right.
It's on the liberal, progressive side of things. Because now there's a different set of issues over on the other side. Mm-hmm. But definitely. And so for me, when you see the resentment and people getting there because they were forced to, and this is not a conservative liberal argument, this is just a national argument. How do we just genuinely get to the truth, and are we willing to? Or is everyone, so coming from the street, what we recognize, you know gangbanging when you see it. So I know when it's, you take two black guys.
Yeah.
Why are they black? Because they both come from the western side of the African continent, and their ancestors were brought here as chattel slavery. They're the same people. But they look at one another and they say, this guy you got on a red rag, you got on a blue rag, I don't like you. That's gangbanging. Mm. Red party, blue party. Same thing.
You mean what's going on right now in public?
Yeah. And what's been going on, that I don't like you before
you know anything about it.
Yeah. And just like the two black dudes didn't invent the slave ship, you were born in 1971, you didn't invent the Democratic or the Republican Party.
That's right.
But you chose a gang, or you were born into that.
Yeah, that's right.
And in business,
you chose a color. Yeah.
In business and enterprise, it's the same thing. It's that we have, and you can relate to this, in business conversations, we don't really talk about politics. People kind of make assumptions, but we don't talk about it. But where we do kind of start to pick a game is around whether or not we create a level playing field for everyone to win.
So let me ask you about that, because I think you're right. And particularly now in society, it's so incredibly polarized, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
But I want to get your impression on this, because I actually believe that most things aren't inherently political.
No.
They've been politicized.
100%.
And that we actually need to get real, and it's just so amazing. We were talking about authenticity and getting real is just a part of you growing up.
Yeah.
And this show is about getting real. That it shouldn't be inherently political to talk about what's going on in the world and just be real. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be controversial.
No.
Because I don't think race is a Democrat thing, or who's got a monopoly on that?
Yeah.
Is
not a political party.
Yeah, not a political party.
Yeah.
Everybody should want to if there's shit to fix, let's fix it. It seems pretty fundamental, mm-hmm. and everybody come about it a different way. And there's probably great ideas floating around that just have nothing to do with a political perspective. Well, but I don't see those conversations happening.
The resolve is in discourse, honesty, process. That's where the solution is. What's not in that is a profit. So we start off talking about hip hop, right? Yeah. So hip hop emerges as a reaction to poverty. Yeah. All black music in America is a reaction to poverty. Mm-hmm. Hip hop. So there's elements of hip hop, graffiti. Okay, why is there graffiti? There's graffiti because this guy's in the Bronx sitting around going, man, no one's listening to me, which is a part of poverty, not being heard. So I'm going to spray paint, but why am I going to spray paint on a train? Because a train goes uptown. So now the guy on Wall Street has to see our plight on a train. Why does breakdancing happen on cardboard? Because there's no school for dance in the Bronx in 1978. Yeah. So breakdancing happens on cement. The cardboard is to protect you. When you listen to hip hop, broken glass everywhere. The words are saying what's going on in the time, right? So hip hop has always been a reaction to poverty. And at any given moment, there might be 30 great songs coming out in the culture. But you know this as a business person. You can't market anything that's not predictable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when hip hop becomes commercialized on the radio, let's say you put all your money, let's say you put 30 million behind 10 songs. And there's a young female MC that has a song that everyone's gonna like. But now we talk about this positively. We never did before 5 years ago. She's a disruptor. Mm-hmm. You're banking
Yeah,
on your
right.
30 million here. She's gonna come and disrupt that with a song that she recorded in her bathroom on a cell phone. But
Oh.
everyone's gonna love it. So you control the market because, well, this is now leaked into the political conversation.
Yeah.
What is it when, regardless of how anyone feels about him, and I'm not endorsing or negating him, no one thought that after Barack Obama, an old Jewish dude in his 70s, was going to disrupt the Democratic Party. Democrats didn't think that. Well, no one thought about a Bernie.
Yeah.
No one thought that. So he rocks the structure. And now the conversation isn't as plain as Democrat, Republican. Now it's Democrat,
sure,
Republican, a socialist Democrat. Like that was a crazy conversation.
Yeah.
So let's remove that. Now, there's some white people that are not saying they're blatantly racist, but they don't agree with protests and riots in the streets. But there's some white people who agree with protests and riots in the streets. There's some black people that think we should get out there and riot. There's some black people that say, no, we should vote. This is now a fluctuating conversation that you can't market. You can't market the gray area. There's no gray area network. There's no gray area.
Yeah.
But we know in our lives, nobody is one. Chris Rock has a great joke. He says, I'm conservative about some things, liberal about other things. He says, breaking into my house, conservative. Prostitution, liberal. It's a joke he makes, you know.
That's
it's
great.
a dirty joke, but it's a joke he makes. And this is true, that we have to, in business, be comfortable with the gray area and not be forced into picking a side.
Yeah.
Because business will always drive the other sectors. I believe.
Yeah. Well, in disruptors, which is now a cool term, right?
Yeah.
Is inherently good in a way. I mean, it's a bit anti-establishment.
Yeah.
Wherever it comes from,
Yeah.
it gives new life.
Yeah. And first it'll be beat down like crazy.
You got it. It's the beatdown.
And then
So isn't that what's going on politically right now? Like that the president is the beatdown president, beating down the existing structure.
yeah, that's how he's positioned himself.
Yeah.
And no matter how anyone feels about the president of the United States, this is a sensational celebrity who obliterated the Republican Party. He ran up against like 16 career Republicans.
That's right.
And then
He totally did.
after he obliterated all of them, he runs up against the Democratic Party stronghold and he obliterates them. But how did we get there?
Yeah.
Did we get there through blunt force, you know, and so there's resentment,
Yeah.
or did we get there genuinely? And that's what the question. That's what the country has to wrestle with now.
Yeah.
And so now with the new arguments and the new political parties that are emerging, I think what the people are asking for is authenticity.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I think that's real.
And people will always choose that. I personally, I'm not saying this is your opinion, this is my opinion. I personally, and I'm not saying that you hearing it is an endorsement of it.
I'll give you my opinion.
Yeah, I know you will. but what I think about this is that there's no one who could have looked at the current president when he was running and thought this is a good idea, or that this man knows how to run a nation. No one thought that. But here's the thing. What people were choosing between was maybe some people who know how to run a country, but they're not authentic. Or this guy who's an ass.
Yeah.
But
he's an authentic
He's an
ass.
authentic ass.
You got it.
And they go with authentic every time.
Yeah.
This is what we have to learn
You're
from.
right.
And I don't care.
Absolutely.
I don't care if we're talking about spirituality, leaders in spiritual conversations, business conversations, politics, or daycare.
It's
It's
right.
about who's authentic.
But people can see it.
Yeah.
You know, you can intuit that. I mean,
Yeah.
he speaks at like a 5th grade level.
Yeah.
He's speaking to everybody when he
Yeah.
speaks at a 5th grade
And
level.
people get it.
Because people get it.
Yeah.
And he calls it like he sees it no matter what anybody thinks about it. It doesn't matter with the dumbest sounding thing ever, but it's authentic to him.
Yeah. And,
It's-
and people connect with it, even
Yeah.
people who are adversarial toward it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Mm.
Well, we got real first a
Yeah.
little early.
I'm
We're going to
sorry.
have to get double real.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so well, before it's not time to get fully real yet. So let's talk the progression of your business over 16 years. I mean,
Yeah.
you've done a lot, seen a lot. So what's evolved in the course of your experience working with big brands, corporations, cities, governments? I mean, you've had some great experience.
Yeah.
What's been the arc or the journey, and what have you noticed change over the years?
In the industry, what's changed is that there is, when it comes to product development and tech, a major change that has evolved is an openness to new ideas and a stigmatizing of being stuck in the old way. There used to be an argument, and I mean 10 years ago an argument. Is the old way good? If you want to end your career, you ask that question now. It's never that's not a question. I think something that's changed that I'd like to caution against is that a lot of people feel better than their job.
Explain that.
My birthday is at the end of the year, so no one cares. You know, it's like 3 days after Christmas, you know, before New Year's. And so I often just take a trip. And I took a trip from Puerto Nuevo, Mexico, all the way up to British Columbia by foot, bike, train, car, plane. I made my way up and back down. And I was in Seattle and going to see some site, and there was a cafe, and I'm going up to the cafe, and they have hot chocolate in the window. Of course, it's December, it's freezing. I'm like, that sounds great. And I go, and the woman turns to me and she goes, "We're closed." But there was this vibe. And then on the plane, there was some like sass from a male flight attendant. And instead of getting upset or offended, I don't take it personally and I try to observe it. You know what it is? The average person that's a flight attendant feels better than being a flight attendant. When I'm at a tech company,
You mean they're not humbled?
the regional manager feels like they should be the CEO.
They're entitled.
The person that owns a franchise feels like they should own 5. There's this thing where everyone is looking up. It's part of the American dream.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing about that is that you never are grateful or focused or present in your role now.
But isn't that, you said it's part of the American dream.
Yeah.
But the American dream didn't used to be that way.
No.
But people still looked up. So isn't there an American entitlement that's emerged out of what used to be the American?
Well, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
There's an entitlement to everyone feels like they are a star.
Yeah.
And so they feel, there's almost this attitude like, I didn't come here to work. And when you talk to people, like, so for example, if I look at it, if someone who's trying to get hired by my company, if I look at their resume and they were never anywhere for longer than 2 years,
Yeah, that's a sign.
that tells me like, and maybe it's a good sign if they want to be an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. Even now, there's all these conversations about developing leaders. But are we developing workers?
Yeah.
I'm a CEO, you're a CEO,
Yeah.
you know in the company it's the worst job.
Shit flows up.
It's the worst job.
And they don't even know it. They think it's the best job. Shit flows up, and you
Yeah,
know, like
it's
you don't get it. I report to everyone. I
That's
report
right.
to stakeholders, the community. You
It's
know,
the worst
shareholders,
job.
the board,
It's a blessing.
to you.
But
You know,
but so I've been in parts of the world where the CEO is here, the manager is here, the janitor is here, the project developer is here. It's circular.
That's right.
But in this country, in many countries in the West, it's hierarchical. So there's an ego thing about the top, which gives you a self-esteem issue until you're there.
A chip on the shoulder, maybe.
100%.
Yeah.
But and it also it just makes you a pompous person
Yeah.
professionally. And so when you're asking me about the art, that's one thing that really changed. That when more people feel like they have the opportunity and the access to be a CEO, to be an owner, when they're not that, they feel like a loser. When they're not, the best people at the company are not the CEOs. No real CEO will tell you that they are the best person at the company. You know that your company is as good as the janitor, as good as the person working in the front. And that mentality is something I'm concerned about. Now, it's a balance because I think historically, marginalized people and women have been boxed out of being in leadership. So we need to open up spaces for access.
Yeah.
But I think we should be opening up spaces for access for everyone and elevating the value of everyone's job.
Right.
That's a big change that I've seen. The other thing that I say that I see out there that's different is you have not a total disvalue, but I think a healthy amount of devaluation of formal education. Mm-hmm. I think that some folks should have that. But it's always interesting to me when I hear people, and we do a lot of stuff in tech, and we'll be at a lot of these major tech companies. They'll be like, we wanted to hire them, but we told them to go back and get a master's degree. All these places are started by college dropouts.
Yeah, that's true.
Facebook, Google, Apple, across Twitter.
But what it takes to be a worker.
Yeah. Right. So I think that's an interesting thing. So I hope that answers your question. That's the arc.
Interestingly enough, the management structures and how people move through an organization haven't changed in decades.
No.
And that kind of steals the pride from the role because, in some ways, this sort of, what is it? Not the Pareto rule, there's another rule that people get promoted to their highest level of incompetence. Huh. So the concept of that is you're so good at being A that you get promoted to being B, but you suck at B.
Yeah.
And I've had people over the years come in, and they were always looking up, like they were ready to get to the next level. The thing was they had all the skills to be what they currently are, and none of the skills to do the next job.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they lost by getting promoted because they couldn't succeed in the role.
Mm-hmm. And can't learn from the failure.
Yeah, that's another issue.
That's a big thing. The failing is one thing, but being able to learn from it. And I had to go through that. We all go through that, where you just have to, you take it to the chest and you learn from it. When I was a kid, I was riding my bike. I grew up. Remember the show The Wonder Years?
Oh, yeah.
My childhood was like a hood version of The Wonder Years. I grew up on a dead-end street with all the same friends. Dead-end street in a good way, a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
We rode our bikes, and it was just a safe little bubble where I grew up back in a non-safe environment. And we used to do this thing called ghost riding, where you ride the bike, and you step over to one side, and you jump off the bike. And you got a kick out of seeing the bike go down the street. And not hit a car and kind of ride by itself. My mother hated us doing this, and of course I didn't listen to her. And one day, I get over and I miscalculate something. I'm maybe 11 years old, and I fall off the bike, and the handlebar hit me right in the chest. Whoa. And I had never gotten the wind knocked out of me before. And if you haven't experienced it before, getting the wind knocked out of you, getting food poisoning for the first time, these are moments where you meet death for the first time. And all the air is out of my little body. And my mother talked me through gaining small breaths until I got it back. That prepared me for the next time I was on the bike. If I'm falling, I'm avoiding handlebars. And I'm ready to... And you need that. When you get the wind knocked out of you in business, you have to be able to learn how to catch your breath.
Brush it
off.
off.
If you're escalating and promoting, and not only are employees trying to, from a space of ego, get promoted, managers and CEOs have an ego trip about, I promote and create new leaders. So there's this whole egoic expediting of the process because no one wants to be a worker and nobody wants to be a CEO that doesn't promote. And I think every company and every business and every leader has to pace themselves.
So you're saying the CEOs perpetuate the problem?
Often.
By creating a sense of upward mobility or, that because it seems like it's a good thing to do, right? Morally, to raise your people up.
Yeah.
When in fact, you need people to work. You need people that are good at it.
Yeah.
And it might be a better, wiser thing to find ways to value people that are good at it more, staying in their role.
Yeah, and I think for entrepreneurial CEOs, so not CEOs that are at traditional companies.
Right.
If you're an entrepreneur, you have a hard time relating to, like, when I meet someone and they say they worked at a company for 20 years, I have a hard time relating to that. So the idea of someone else
And here you are 16 years later.
yeah, but I work for myself and
Yeah.
my business. I'm saying someone who goes and works at Ford for 21 years, I have a hard time relating. 6, I almost feel like I'm doing a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I gotta promote this person. You know, I'm making a robot. I'm doing it. You know, and you're not. You're not. And I think relating to the fact and value, when we value the worker,
Yeah.
we don't have an issue with developing workers.
Yeah.
We're providing workplace. When we value the CEO, we're guilty. We feel guilty about everyone that's not a CEO.
Yeah.
And that and that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, you've been at this, so now it's 16 years you've been at it.
Yeah.
And what were your biggest takeaways? I mean, you aren't, by the way, you are not a minority-owned business in the sense of the certification
No.
with a filing with the government. And
No.
it's a really interesting thing that you said, no.
Yeah, it didn't even dawn on me.
Okay.
You know, like we don't get any benefits or any supplemental stuff as a firm from being not only minority led, but I mean every type of acronym that's out there now.
Right,
can
you just
apply
didn't
to my
bother with it.
staff, you know.
You just
There's-
went for it.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that also where I came up at, that was kind of natural, you know. So it didn't dawn on me in that regard. I think the biggest takeaways, you know, for me, have been that there's enough room out there for everyone. That business is the art of efficiency. You know, if you are efficient and consistent, it generates. It's like a physics of business. I think that when you compound that by building something that's filling a void, that's helpful and solving a problem. So nothing that I've talked about in my answer to you right now is about money.
Yeah.
Money is it's a manifestation of
it's a lagging indicator from
Yeah.
an economic
Yeah.
standpoint. You don't drive your car looking through the rear view mirror.
No.
Money is the rear view mirror of business.
That's right. That's right. And now, even more, there's a need to be resolving and solving issues, you know, and I think that Bezos is catching a lot of flack at Amazon. And one thing that I watched him say, he was saying that people say that he's self-made. And he goes, that's not true. He said, there was an infrastructure. There was a business infrastructure, a credit infrastructure, something called the World Wide Web that I was able to leverage. So he's putting $1 billion a year into developing infrastructure in outer space.
Mm-hmm.
And as an entrepreneur that is, now I'm increasingly interested in being an industrialist and building out industry. I think it's important more than ever for people to be building businesses that solve problems and solve issues. And the more we're distracted by ant-like discourse and pageantry, we don't have, this sounds a little eccentric, man, but I think we got 100 years before the earth gets hit with a solar flare.
Yeah.
That's it. We gotta go. And we're not gonna do it on Zoom calls. We're not gonna do it in pseudo political debates. We head up to the next rock based on, and preserve this rock based in innovating and solving problems.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, entrepreneurship is what made this country.
Mm-hmm.
It gave people opportunity. People
Yeah.
come from all over the world. My parents came from overseas, from the Middle East, to my mom's side of the family with nothing to create. Mm-hmm. And it shows you what you can do with nothing, or they leave their everything, their families, their belongings, to come here to do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's get real.
Okay.
Before we do, because there's so much to talk about. You've had the chance to learn about us and how we could, how we work in the world at Exemplar, and just wanted to get your take on it.
The first thing that stood out to me that's significant is being upfront about having a casual stride while doing things the right way and efficiently. I think part of the smoke and mirrors in business often is unnecessary pretension.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And
Especially
so,
in law, by the
yeah,
way, tax,
yeah,
all the
yeah.
learned industries.
And so I think that, so that's something that really stands out to me. And then the fact that you all are insulating in one box these key functions. You know, I think for me as a business, often we're having to, you know, we're talking to one group over here, we're having to develop with another company around here. And then how do we get the folks that's doing the tax prospecting aspect of our deal talking to the people that are developing the product? And also, when I turn away and they're talking to one another, are they going to offend each other? You know, are there, you know, what, the biggest thing is, what is the emotional intelligence of 8 different people in a room?
No doubt.
So when and looking at Exemplar and go, okay, they've got those things figured out in a unit.
Yeah.
And if one of them are having a problem, okay, well, talk to the other one of you about it.
They figure it out as a team.
That's something that's great in business. I think it's in business a revolutionary promise to be able to, and even more so an evolutionary promise, to be able to say that, you know, we're committed to moving these things, and then and of course your fee model is impressive. You know.
Well, customer centricity and obsessiveness with the customer is, you gotta get rid of the ego. And if you're all on one team, you can remove the ego dynamics of having people from different firms that have to be right to look better. Because they have their own economic interest in being right. When you're on one team, you don't have a distinctive interest. You have one interest. Solve the damn problem. And it's been such a joy to do it. And don't get me wrong, building Noah's Ark isn't easy, because one zebra eats something, some other animal on the ship, and you gotta
that's an interesting metaphor.
You gotta learn the tricks. But I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, we want to get real about some issues going on.
Sure.
You got to drink a little bit. I'm ahead of you.
Oh yeah, you are. Are you drunk?
Cheers. Oh yeah, drunk on energy drinks. I love it.
It's actually good, man.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I'm gonna give these guys a try. This is another client of ours. So Ise, by the way, Ise is short.
Yeah, I-S-E. My mother named me Isaac. I never hear that. You know, when I grew up as a kid, everyone called me Ise for short, and it just stuck.
So you grew. I mean, God, Oakland. That was a hell of a time you grew up in Oakland.
Yeah, it's not how it is now.
No doubt, it's totally different now.
Yeah, totally.
I'm fascinated by, though, the fact that we were talking about walking through campus, and that that would have been like people would have called the police or something on a liberal campus at that time is remarkable.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah,
when you see recently like
Berkeley,
students protesting on the campus, and a guy comes with a big orange can of mace and just sprays all of them. You know, that wasn't in Missouri. You know,
that's true. That's true.
And it's also a historic thing. You know, at Kent State, when students were shot on campus. So that's always been an interesting dynamic. You know, and I think it's dangerous when we kind of fix our assumption to where it's safe and where it's not safe.
You and I have had conversations about what's going on politically, socio-political issues. You have a hell of a head screwed on and had to find your way. Because you were also surrounded. You're surrounded by gangs when you grew up, right? Yeah.
Where I'm from in Oakland, we don't have so much a gang culture as a turf culture. So so where I'm from in Oakland, at least especially amongst black communities, there's not like a color gang thing, like a color rag.
Yeah, no, that's not a race.
No,
like the rags.
Red,
okay, got it.
But there's I'm from a neighborhood called Brookfield, and then right across the tracks from us is a neighborhood called Sobrani Park, and then on the other side of the Coliseum, where you might have grown up watching the Raiders or the Warriors play at, there's the 6ix9ine Village, the project housing. So our city was broken down into turfs, which was a little different, but definitely a dangerous environment to grow up in.
But so how did you find, what was your North Star? How did you stay out of the riffraff? Or did you?
Yeah, I think I stayed out of the deeper, more dangerous stuff. So the thing about my generation is, I'm 10 years old in 1992. That's the height of the crack epidemic in this country. And for the children, though teenagers and adults were being ravaged by policing, prison, drugs, murder, there was this kind of interesting thing that was going on where the children were being coveted with DARE programs, say no to drugs, don't smoke cigarettes.
This is your brain on crack.
Yeah,
Remember that commercial?
No, nobody ever says I want to be a junkie when I grow up. You know, those commercials, those things. So I think on a broader scale, that had a great impact on me. With me, the North Star was, I didn't want to be a burden to my mom. You know, so one of the first things that I started doing.
Was your dad in the house?
No.
Okay.
No, we left my father when I was 7.
Okay, so this is one of the biggest crises in the black community, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is the father not being in the house?
Yeah, I believe so. I think in suburban communities, the family crisis is canned heat of like families that might stay together, and children in like a suburban area are exposed to like crazy divorces or domestic violence or prescription drugs. In the inner city where I grew up, it was the cat just isn't there.
Right.
So my parents split when I was 7 and got a divorce when I was 8 or 9 years old, and that's perpetual in our communities. Now it's also something that's as systematic as, so for example, you may look at like for example, you look at drugs and guns in the inner city. No one in the inner city is growing cocaine, and no one in the inner city is manufacturing guns. So there has to be intermediary.
Yeah.
Well, there's policies that were in place when I was growing up that if a mom was living in public housing and receiving public aid, if a man moved into the house, the father of her children moved into the house, well, she'd lose the aid.
No doubt. So the economic policies discourage healthy
definitely
families.
The major devastating thing, I believe, more than drugs, more than anything else, is the devastation of black and brown families.
Yeah.
And the normalization of fathers not being there.
That's right.
This should be stigmatized. I believe that.
It should be.
And this is a touchy thing for me to talk about. But I think if in the neighborhood, if it's like, you know, if your clothes are whack, you get teased. If your hair is whack, you get teased. You know, if it's wrong for you to give information to law enforcement. I understand all of that. But we also need to put on that list, if you have a kid around the corner that you never see, that's just as whack as those things. So
Absolutely.
How I grew up.
I was going to ask you where they go. Where do the guys go?
What do you mean?
The fathers.
Well, it's not. I appreciate the courage in your question. So I'm not laughing in that way. I think that what happens is, well, there's a lot of guys go to prison.
Oh, okay.
A lot of guys get killed, but a lot of guys also just didn't grow. We're talking about generational thing. So for example, people ask me all the time, like I'll be on a yacht or something, and a white guy will go, "Ice man, how come? Can I ask you something?" And I already know.
He'll ask you like some courageous, ignorant white guy question that they had to ask a black guy.
But here's the one I get asked on the boat.
Okay, got it.
On the boat, they go, "How come black guys can't swim?" And it's true. A lot of black people in America can't swim. What's our relationship with water, though? Being thrown off the side of a slave ship, being sprayed with a water hose, being told that you'll be lynched.
So they're like cats, whereas like dogs like water.
Being told that you'll be lynched for being in a no colored allowed pool. That's our relationship with water.
Right.
So the question is, well, when the hell are we supposed to learn how to just have this loving relationship? Now, a white guy, his relationship with water is surfing, owning the damn slave ship, being able to call the police on the black person in the pool, water polo, have a jubilant experience with water. So the same philosophy should be applied to, well, yeah, man, a black guy has a kid, he should be there. But what was his relationship to be? For 400 years, black people couldn't get married. You could have a child and be sold off. You could be killed for learning how to read. These things. So there wasn't like. I agree. I don't believe that anything is an excuse.
So you can hold the problem.
Yeah.
And you can also hold the circumstances for it at the same time.
Yeah, and I believe in that.
Yeah,
so that's what happens.
right.
I think that's what happens. But we have to stop making excuses about it, though, and rise to the occasion of it in our communities. So for me, my father wasn't there. It was just me and my mom. And I didn't want to be a burden to my mom. So what I started doing is I cut a deal with the liquor store on the corner. Here's an example. Where I grew up at, this is geographical environmental racism. There's a liquor store on every corner. In my neighborhood, there was 3 liquor stores. You understand what I'm telling you? I'm telling you, in a 2-mile radius, there was 3 liquor stores.
Huh.
No library. No, there actually was a library. There's one library. But there's just liquor store, no healthy food, no anything. Well, what I did, I didn't go in there and buy liquor from the guys, or I didn't do what some of my friends did. They went and got cigarettes and sold cigarettes around the neighborhood. I got him, I didn't know this, what I was doing there. Now I know the language. I got candy on consignment, where he'd give me a box of Snickers.
No kidding.
And I'd go and I'd sell the Snickers. And I'd come and bring him the money for the box. And I started, because I wanted to help my mom, I wanted to be, my mother would never take money from me. Even now, my mom could have anything. My mother, I'm arguing with her right now. She won't let me renovate her bathroom.
No kidding.
You know, like, she's like, that's the kind of woman she is. And I respect that about her. But by having my own money, I was able to not need money from her. And I think that was a big part of my development coming up in Oakland and enterprising. And then it taught me how to work with people and talk to people. I also was always kind of endeared to and endeared by older people. I got along with my teachers at my school, in elementary school. I spent a lot of time with my grandma and grandpa, and I think it just gave me a different perspective.
That's great to hear. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, by the way. Well, Ise, I wanted to ask you about like what's going on in the world right now. It's so polarizing in the market, right? People's perspectives. It seems to me that there's a saying, I don't know if you've heard this saying, that if you are old and you're not conservative or Republican, you don't have a brain. And if you're young and you're not liberal, you don't, or Democrat, you don't have a heart.
Yeah, I haven't heard that, but I understand it.
And it used to be that the Democratic Party was about heart and inclusion, openness and free speech.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really take much to hear a lot of intolerance and hate and disgust and closedness around discussions, right? I mean, discourse is supposed to be a good thing. It's what's needed. How do we get from a society that's supposedly woke to parties that can't have a conversation? And I don't want to say parties because I actually think there's one party more than another that is shutting down conversation. But how do we get there and rationalize that the Democratic Party hasn't lost its heart?
I think what you're saying about the Democratic Party today is true. And I think when Obama was in office, what you're saying about the Democratic Party was true about the Republican Party. And it goes like that. I think that you have a broad political system and a broad racial base that whoever's in power, because from a space of power, you know this in business, you can hear other perspectives. You can listen to what's going on. You can because you're in a place of power. There's no coup coming to the country. So you can kind of be in a place of power and you can hear other perspectives. When you're not in power, like the first time I heard "not my president" wasn't for Trump. First time I heard "not my president" was for Obama. That's the first time first time I ever heard people saying he's not my president.
Really?
Yeah,
I was in
Iowa. I was
kidding.
And then again in Appleton, Wisconsin. There was like, I just can't receive this dude as my president. He's not American. He wasn't born in this country. He's a Muslim. I haven't seen his birth certificate. So now you go to Trump. And when I heard that, I thought that was dumb. Now I hear it with Trump and I think it's dumb. When I hear people go, he's not my president. Yes, he is. He's not really a politician. He's an elected president to the highest office, and he used hyper politics to get there. He is a politician. He's stupid. He's not stupid. And if he's stupid, everybody he's beat is dumber than him.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I think that it's this real kind of where I think what's really happened. You know what it's like?
So,
it's like, man.
Yeah, go ahead,
It's like
and then I'll
this.
pivot the question.
It's like this. It's like if a mother and father married in a house with children, they're fighting. And the mom is like, you're, and the dad is like, you're, and when they get a chance, they go leak their little grievances to the children. What the parents are not addressing is that the marriage sucks. The dad party and the mom party sucks. And who suffers is the children, who really don't have a political mighty muscle in the game. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are historically prejudiced, historically manipulative, have moments of gross incompetence, have times where they said they were going to do something and they didn't do it at all.
Most of the time.
Have a foreign policy that... So the real fear
Yeah.
is that the masses, when I go in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, they can't believe how fanatical we are about our presidents.
Right.
They can't believe it. That's the conversation. Like, they can't believe how fanatical we are. And I believe that it's just a time thing. I think now people in Rome don't really care about the prime minister of Italy. But when Caesar was running things,
That's right.
when Rome was as old as America is now, back then, they were fanatic about Rome. That's the thing. But when we look at America on the global stage, you go to these other countries, they're 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
America is what, 240?
Yeah.
It's just a social immaturity, and that's my personal feeling.
So, okay. So I'm with you, and I totally get in a political context.
Yeah.
What do you make of those society? Because it used to be, I get it. There's no excuse. The politicians, they're politicians.
Yes.
They're going to do what politicians do.
Yes.
But it seems like something changed. There hasn't been a time in my lifetime, Ise, has there been for you, where the people that voted for the majority in power, the voters, just regular people, actually feel oppressed, unable to speak.
Yeah.
Today, right here, as we speak, the people that I know, everyone, CEOs, normal people too, like just anybody, they don't feel safe to speak.
Now not that you need this, but I'm going to say what I hear you saying, which is that the Republican Party won, and if you voted Republican, you're a winner right now. And how the people who won in a arguably fair election, they feel suppressed, like they can't speak.
The voters don't feel safe to speak, even just they made a choice, and it might have been a Hobson's choice. Half the time you vote for any politician, it's a Hobson's choice. It's like, that's the best we got. Okay.
The biggest divorce in the country. The biggest divorce in the country. You and I both experienced this. We saw. I didn't see. I was too young, but I don't know of Reagan, Jimmy Carter, Nixon being regulars on Johnny Carson. But Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, regulars.
No doubt.
On, the only one that didn't do it was Bush, the last Bush.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Regulars on, like, doing comedic skits on Saturday Night Live.
SNL, things like that.
So you have politics and entertainment married, Hollywood and politics married. Trump happens, and a divorce happens between socially polite Hollywood and the political structure. And you have, I think that's what creates this thing, because what makes people feel comfortable is whatever the social norm is. The social norm is set by media. If media in Hollywood is divorced from the political structure in ways that before it wouldn't have been. When you look at the 40s and the 50s, all those propaganda things, those Disney making pro World War II videos, that's a union of a conservative politic and Hollywood.
Yeah.
that got severed. And I think that, and I don't think it's right. I see this, Christopher, I see this on more liberal college campuses. They'll protest a conservative voice coming there, and I disagree with that. Now, one of my mentors was Congressman Ron Dellums, and Ron Dellums taught me, if your argument and your position is strong, you don't need to negate the other side.
That's right.
And he did that. He always willing to hear an argument, and I think for the younger generation, I encourage that there's a space for people, as long as people are not doing anything that is violently harmful. Mm-hmm. I think people should be able to voice what they're saying and say what they're feeling and live in it. But as we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, there's no money in that, man.
I said, it just occurred to me that we're talking about intolerance, mm-hmm. intolerance for ideology or different viewpoint, conservative views. Mm-hmm. Isn't the same, like, what do you make of it? What do you make of the intolerance? The same intolerance that is racism, that mm-hmm. created racism, is prevalent on campuses and in the younger generation against conservative or other views that they don't like to hear. And how do they not make the connection between the same intolerance that is racism as being an intolerance that's going to destroy us differently? When
I hear, often in business, people say, a model you'd hear people talking about all the time was tolerance. We're a tolerant business. You tolerate too many people on an elevator. You don't tolerate how Filipino someone is. It's like you accept them. You don't tolerate women in the workplace. You accept women in the workplace. You don't tolerate someone's political opinion or social opinion. You accept it. And you're only able to accept it when you're confident enough in yourself to have a different view and be presented with something else. I think the reason that they don't realize the lack of intolerance that's there and how hypocritical it is because there's this politeness that's not based in acceptance. It's based in faux tolerance. When I listen to people talk, this was new for me when I got to LA, which I started coming to LA 15 years ago. People would talk like this. Even if they were making a statement, they would end it like a question. Like, can you please stop doing that right now? Or leave me alone. What it is such an obsession with not being rude that even a statement is presented like a question. You're being an ass right now, but it's really a statement. We have a culture that's obsessed with politeness. So the hypocrisy of intolerance and why, one political group might not realize that they're totally being intolerant is because the real fear is that we can't even there's a fear of friction. But I just want to push back a little and say that right now we are seeing that. I see it, I'll own it 100%. People on the left or the Democratic side of the party are shutting down, not listening, judging, and casting. But it's because they're not in the position of power. 7 years ago...
Which doesn't excuse it, it's just an observation.
No. I'm saying that it is inexcusable, that they shouldn't be doing that. But 7 years ago, when it was turned, the conservative Republican side of things was doing the same thing. It was like, oh, you're not American. So the left doesn't say that. The left doesn't use terms like that. The right does that. You're not American. And I believe it's a philosophical thing and a social experiment in power. And when in a tantrum that's thrown by the people who are not in power, a sore losing tantrum.
Yeah.
And I think what's so hard for the Democratic Party right now is not only to not be in power, but to have lost and to continue to lose everything they come at this president with, they're losing.
That's true.
They say, there's a Russian conspiracy. Okay, there's a loss there. There's a constant loss. So the sore loot, but you know what it is? Not accepting. First of all, not accepting that he won. Yeah. He won.
Yeah, that's right.
But then on top of that, not accepting a new version of a Democrat.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely true.
Not accepting Bernie. So
Yeah,
now, so this is what the
and that backlashed on him too.
This is what the this is what the Democratic establishment failed on two fronts doing. One, not accepting that Trump was president of the United States, never accepting it.
Yeah.
Which is the same way the Republican Party suffered Obama for 8 years.
That's right.
Never accepted it. So they never built something better. If it wasn't for Trump, who is not a part of the Republican establishment, the Republican Party wouldn't have won again. If they had tried to run a Ryan or anything, they wouldn't have won.
Not a chance.
So now, but the Democratic Party didn't, first of all, accept Trump and hasn't, but then didn't accept, we're about to have a presidential election in November. Let me tell you something, man.
Oh yeah, well you and I know what's going to happen.
Let me tell you something.
Okay, you give your prediction
Kids,
first.
No one, people would have stood in line and died in the snow in the middle of a pandemic to vote for Bernie Sanders. No one is standing in the snow for Biden.
No doubt.
No one. No,
doubt.
I wouldn't stand in the rain for Biden.
He's in his own basement, so I'm not sure he's going to come out to vote.
But at the end of all of it, what I think is shameful, every once in a while, and I encourage people to do this.
Yeah.
Turn on the news, flip between CNN and Fox News in front of a 9-year-old that you love. And you are ashamed of your own affiliation with this bullshit. Because who's on our flag? Really, your integral flag is children.
Yeah.
And all of it is beneath our next generation. And I believe that they're looking at this just like, what happens to the analogy I gave before? The parents that fight each other and name call each other, the kid fucking leaves both of them.
Yeah.
Both parents don't know where their 21-year-old is.
Yeah.
Because the kid resents both of the parents. The kid doesn't pick a side.
Yeah.
What's happening now is that this next generation of children, you think they believe in a president or Instagram?
Yeah.
Do they believe in Paul Ryan or what Steve Jobs created? That's the question. And that's where we're headed towards is a total irrelevance, no different than the Queen of England. When you go to London,
irrelevance of the
when you go to London, if you're from London and you're like, I love the Queen, younger generations will laugh at you.
That's true.
It's like liking Big Bird.
That's true.
It's
That's
like
absolutely,
being passionate.
absolutely.
This next
right,
generation, a kid born in the year 2015, you know how crazy that is, bro? That's 12 years after Tupac died. You're born in 2015, they're not participating in the 2032 election.
Yeah.
They're not participating in that. I don't think they're gonna care about that. Yeah. And it's the fault of the current structure.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Yeah. Well, let me pivot to the people.
Yeah.
We were talking about politeness and the PC culture a bit, right? Because you could boil the politeness down to a PC culture.
100%.
And in some ways, you could boil Trump's brashness and the attractiveness of that as a rage against the PC culture.
Yeah.
We started this conversation talking about authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things that strikes me is that the people who I always knew who went out of their way to be so polite didn't authentically hold the polite views they supposedly held.
No, it's just an aversion to conflict.
You got it.
Yeah.
They were putting on an image. But behind closed doors, when you see how they live, what the husbands and wives say to each other and how they live with their kids, they don't feel anything like, and they're not those polite people they pretend to be. And so I think there's an element of just the fakeness of, isn't it ironic that we're here talking about authenticity and that we're experiencing such just like obviously inauthentic
It's
humans.
back to the analogy. If the mother and father are yelling at each other and they're fake and they're saying that family matters, in every family though, you got a drunk wino uncle who effectively is a loser, Trump. But he's a wino that's real. Yeah. He keeps it real. He's not judgmental. Even when he says stuff that's so dumb, it's hilarious. And you just build an affinity for the.
You gotta love your uncle. You're always gonna call him.
Your Uncle Larry.
Your
Uncle Larry is the mascot of your family. You know,
right.
if you go to a college football game, They're serious about the players, but there's a deep affection for the mascot. He's a badger, a squirrel, or something. He's loosely affiliated with the school, but it doesn't really make sense. That's who Trump is. Trump is a mask. He's everything American. He's everything like that. And when all else fails, when your team is losing,
yeah, that's true. All you got's a
you
mascot.
love the badger.
All you got.
I got the badger. He's the badger, man.
That is awesome. That is can I give you something for that analogy?
Yeah. That's what I think, man.
That's amazing. What do we do to solve the breakthrough the authenticity barrier? Because you've nailed. We all know what we need.
Yeah.
But we've got to break the glass around the fakeness of people who think that they are authentically good because they're polite.
Yeah, I think it will. I think that's something that's at risk right now. I think people are hyper consumed with no conflict. There's a stigma put on discourse, and also here's another thing with the cell phone thing. Most people, if someone's competing against me, and I made 20 million last year, and they made 14 million, I'm not better than them. Do you know why I made 6 more? Because I'm not looking at my phone all day.
Yeah.
I'm looking around. That $6 million edge is that I'm not wiping my ass with my phone.
Yeah.
So with what's happening right now is that folks are not building the muscle of conflict.
Yeah.
They're not of polite, respectful discourse. They're not building that. When you read the transcripts from these discourse between Abraham Lincoln and his adversaries, it's brilliant mess talk. But they're sticking to the room and they're in it and they're not. And my students, teaching a residency at USC, one of my students, they hear something they don't agree with, they go, I can't, and they walk out.
Seriously?
Oh yeah, and it's applauded, by the way.
That happens now?
Oh my God, it's just started happening. The last 3 years when I'm teaching on college campuses.
They allow that?
Allow their students in the class. What do you mean allow?
Just you bring a snowflake melting machine in
No,
there. What are you talking
listen,
about?
man. They say I can't, and they walk out of the conversation. So on the liberal side of it, somebody in the classroom has a conservative view or an ignorant view because they just don't know. Like as a man, I can relate to the ignorance of white people in gender conversations. I might accidentally, as a man, say something that is inadvertently sexist, not calling a woman out of her name or making a reference to her body, but I'm just ignorant because I'm a dumb man.
Yeah.
So dumb white people, it's not like they're in the Klan.
No, but they say dumb white shit.
I'll give you an example. I built my house here, not far from here. Fireman, real white boy, man, comes down the driveway. I'm watering the plants because the gardener was sick. I'm watering the plants. The fireman comes down. He's passing out notices about brush clearing. He looks me dead in my face. He hands me a thing. He says, give this to your landlord. Dumbass white boy.
Dumbass white boy.
Dumbass white boy. But he didn't really, what he meant was, hey, don't interrupt you. Know you're doing your thing. It would never dawn on him. He didn't mean it like that.
That's right.
So
I totally get it.
often in my class,
or you'd say, you hand something to a woman, say, give this to your boss, as if like
she might own the company.
You got it.
Right? So so in Orange County, some 20-year-old kid from Orange County, 20 years old, he's born in the year 2000. Do you understand that? Yeah. He's born in the year 2000. He makes an ignorant comment. Someone else in the class goes, I can't, and they walk out. Let me tell you what you can do. You're still paying for this class, and you're not strong enough. So that's what the liberal side's doing. What's the young conservative white kid doing, though? He can't. He hops in a car and just mows over a crowd of protesters. Mm-hmm. Both of them, highly ignorant responses. Yeah. There's no engagement and discourse.
It was dangerous on both sides.
Yeah, so we have to create a space, and this isn't in gangland or in a Taliban war territory. This is on university. All of this violence that you're seeing, it's the squares. It's on a college campus. It's not in the hood. Yeah. It's not in Istanbul. It's in in college towns where people can't have a discourse and have a conversation. And I believe what it's really about is they're terrified. If I had looked up at that fireman and said, hey, wait a minute, man, what makes you think I don't own this place?
Right.
He's got a decision to make. Does he apologize? Or does he go, kiss my ass? Does he do it? And both of our reaction is based on an insecurity. Confidently owning my home and the one across the street and the one over there,
yeah.
I looked at him and I kind of got a kick out of it actually, you know? And I'm sure if he knew me, he would have laughed it off.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the thing that we have to get through.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Well, you know, getting to know each other has been a pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
And having this kind of dialogue, you know, I appreciated just getting to know you before we even thought about coming in here and doing this.
Yeah.
But like, I think I crave these conversations.
Me too, man.
And I think like I want to live every day of my life being able to have conversations like this with everyone I meet.
Yeah.
So I'd
like to give you a compliment, man. That when I get a call for me and a bunch of people who agree with me to sit on a panel, it's nauseating. I think it's so whack, you know. I think the fact that you're creating a platform for healthy friction, not necessarily, you know, I don't think we have any friction.
There wasn't
between
any
us.
friction here.
No, and I think what you're exemplifying is the fact that there's a safe space for the conversation, but that it's a needed conversation, man. So much respect to you, man.
Thanks,
I really respect what you're doing.
I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
I actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like saying, I love you, man.
It's reciprocated,
Yeah.
man. It's reciprocated.
Well, thanks a bunch for coming on.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
we're going to do this again. Everybody, I'm Christopher Marston. This is CEOs Get Real, and today we got real with Ise Lyfe from Lyfe Productives.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with me, and
Thank you.
cheers.
Cheers.
All right, bro.